If you think Netflix told you everything you need to know about Pablo Escobar, think again. Things may not be how they appear. And when it comes to Pablo Escobar, you can never be too sure. Leader of the Medellin cartel, the once feared and revered king of cocaine had secrets known by few and divulged by even less. Details of Escobar's life get murky in the years 1989 and 1990 and the last 8 months of his life when he was on the run from the Colombian authorities and the Los Pepes. While Narcos attempts to color in the lines and fill in the gaps with its versions of events, its portrayal of some events seem to ignore the truth. So here are some things Netflix is hiding about Pablo Escobar. Escobar's failed political career. Escobar indeed wanted to be the president of Colombia. His ambition for power and prestige was what motivated so many of his decisions, and Narcos showed that.
Congresista Escobar. Señor, discúlpeme. Permítame recordarle las normas de etiqueta. Usted no puede entrar a la sala si no tiene corbata.
In Season 1, Episode 3, Escobar walks into the Senate meeting, his hair untamed, his collar unpressed, and top buttons undone. He looked like a man who did not belong to the polished, sleek, upper-crust circle of politicians. Narcos, at several points, showed that Escobar was never accepted into the elite class. He borrowed a tie from the guard. He shook hands with a rough vigor considered improper for the elite. And most importantly, he was exposed as a drug criminal by Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. In a matter of a single day, Escobar was rejected. In its typical sensationalized fashion, Narcos showed Escobar slowly rising from his seat, and after one last long look at Bonilla, walked out of the meeting without saying a single word. A later scene shows Escobar making a distraught and passionate speech to a crowd, announcing his resignation. He sounds sincere, disappointed, and dejected. The scene then cuts to Bonilla in the backseat of his car, being followed by a motorcyclist, after refusing to wear a bulletproof vest for his protection. Within seconds, he was shot several times and died. In reality, these things took time. In 1982, Escobar was elected as a stand-in for another Congress member. He spent 2 years in that seat. His resignation came in 1984. Unlike the show Narcos, Bonilla did not dramatically unveil the mugshot before Congress. One of his allies did. Guillermo Cano was the editor of the newspaper El Espectador. Cano followed Bonilla's allegations and dug up a news story from several years ago in which Escobar was charged with drug possession. This led to a slow and steady buildup of public criticism against Escobar and led to his eventual resignation. Guillermo Cano, the editor of the newspaper, was murdered. Bonilla died on April 30th, 1984. This was a death that was a long time coming. On that fateful day, Bonilla rode in a Mercedes-Benz W123 and was accompanied only by his driver and 2 guard vans in the front and back. While the show showed a parallel between Escobar giving his resignation speech and Bonilla being chased by the motorcyclists until he was shot, things were different. Escobar wasn't the only enemy Bonilla had made. Bonilla had been a vocal critic of drug cartels in Colombia. He stalked several drug capos, grounded 300 planes that smuggled drugs to the US, and proposed a pact to halt drug trafficking. Bonilla had joined Luis Carlos Galán Sarmiento and founded the New Liberalism Party, which participated in the 1982 elections and won the third ballots by almost 800,000 votes. He was President Betancourt's only advisor who was vocal about the ever-growing power of drug cartels. He knew he would die. So much so that he asked to be reassigned as ambassador to Czechoslovakia, where he could take his family away from the threats in Colombia. Just a day before his death, he told the Bogota daily El Tiempo that he could not remain in the country anymore. And Escobar wasn't quite the victim of the elite system when Bonilla was killed. He was on the run from Colombian authorities. He was in no position to make public speeches in front of a sympathetic crowd when, in fact, he was a disgraced criminal hiding from the law. Escobar as a family man. But Narcos never quite did it justice. One of the things Narcos attempted to do was humanize its muse. Narcos showrunner Eric Newman stated in a Variety interview that it's dangerous to dehumanize a villain like Escobar. Humanizing a historical figure is a classic Hollywood trap. At some point, the only way to humanize someone as inhuman as Escobar is to completely remove parts of him that made him the way he was. Unsurprisingly, that is exactly what Newman did. There are scenes splattered scattered across both seasons 1 and 2 that showed Escobar not as a terrorizing drug lord, but as a quiet, caring family man. Apologizing to his wife for constantly having to move, looking genuinely distraught at the mess his greed had dragged his family into, Narcos Escobar appears as a man who some viewers may even begin to sympathize with. Narcos' method of humanizing Escobar was to completely turn a blind eye towards some of the perhaps most sinister parts of Escobar's character, like his pedophiliac tendencies. Escobar's wife, a woman completely besotted with and devoted to her husband in the show, was only 14 when Escobar pursued her. When she gave birth to her son at 15, she was in her English class at school and had to take a permit to go to the hospital. In their quest to show Escobar as a multi-dimensional, morally great person with both good and bad battling for dominance, Narcos somehow omitted this detail. Escobar always had an appetite for teenage girls. In fact, after one of his parties, bodies of 24 teenage girls were discovered at his house. Although the show on Netflix shows Escobar's infidelity, it makes no mention of the fact that he mostly preyed on young, naive girls. The truth of the matter was that Escobar lacked a conscience. His son revealed in his memoir, titled Pablo Escobar, My Father, that Escobar would proudly point to the TV screen whenever there would be news of a bomb attack and exclaim that it was he who planted it. While the family was on the run, Escobar made his children wear blindfolds so they wouldn't know where they were headed. This was not done for their safety. It was done as a precaution so that if they were captured and tortured, they could not disclose Escobar's location. Let's pivot to the mischaracterization of Escobar's wife, Victoria Eugenia, in the show.
¿Me oyes quejarme? Siempre y cuando vos estés con nosotros, Pablo. Estoy dispuesta a hacer lo que sea.
In Narcos, Tata is depicted as the lovely, wide-eyed lady who supported her husband without question and stuck to his side even during his worst moments. In reality, his wife wasn't quite a willing accomplice. She was a victim herself. In her memoir, Mrs. Escobar, My Life with Pablo, Eugenia admitted that she stayed by his side partly out of fear about what might happen to her if she crossed him. She also admitted in her memoir that there were too many instances where she disagreed with his work and was critical of his career choices. That is not all. Some scenes in Narcos, and their attempts to tug at the viewer's heartstrings, paint Escobar in a light that he never quite deserved. Like the end of Season 2, which showed that all his associates and friends had either abandoned him or died in his hands, and that he was left all alone. He visited his father's house and stayed there for a while.
Quieto. Tranquilo.
This was made up by the filmmakers. No one quite knew where Escobar was while he was on the run. He was an elusive ghost, flitting from place to place, leaving no trace behind. Escobar's cruelty. Netflix seemed to have glossed over Escobar's cruelty the same way it emphasized his nature as a family man. The man you saw on screen is simply a caricature. The real Escobar once caught his servant stealing silverware and had him tied and drowned in his swimming pool while his guests enjoyed the show. The real Escobar would have never tolerated this. Escobar showed the same mercy to his friends that he showed to his enemies. For example, in 1987, Carlos Leder Rivas was Escobar's right-hand man. However, one mistake cost Ladar his life. At one of the Medellin cartel's parties, Ladar shot one of Escobar's hitmen who knocked on the door. He then turned to Escobar and apologized, and the party went on. Escobar said nothing. However, the next day, Escobar led Ladar to a secret hiding space where he was promised a safe haven from the US authorities. Ladar did not complain. Escobar, however, had some tricks up his sleeve. After luring the US authorities to Ladar's hiding place and getting him arrested for his crimes, Escobar simply disposed of his former associate and employee. And these stories continue. In Narcos, Valeria Velez, the news reporter Escobar dated, is killed by Los Pepes. Escobar is portrayed deeply upset by her death in this scene.
Valeria.
In reality, she was granted political asylum in the United States in 2006, and she looks back on her time with Escobar with a resolute dislike. In her book titled Loving Pablo, Hating Escobar, she talks about one incident that terrified her for life. A year into her relationship with Escobar, he confessed a previous girlfriend got pregnant with another man, so he sent his men to drag her to the clinic and get a forced abortion. In another instance, when Escobar was being chased by the authorities and being betrayed by those around him, his paranoia spiraled out of control, and he warned Velez that if she ever opened her mouth, she would be killed. Los Pepes. Season 2 of Narcos focuses on the last 8 months of a cat-and-mouse chase, a deadly alliance formed between the US government, the Colombian government, and the Cali cartel. It was an alliance that, in Narcos, would achieve one of the greatest moments in Colombian history, to kill the biggest narco-terrorist Colombia had ever seen. This alliance led to the formation of a group in 1992 called the Los Pepes, which roughly translates to People Persecuted by Pablo Escobar. Los Pepes was led by Fidel Castano, who was enraged by the murders of his fellow associates Fernando Galeano and Gerardo Moncada when they visited Escobar at La Catedral and decided to bring Escobar's downfall. In the show, Los Pepes is depicted as a paramilitary group with sincere intentions, taking all the necessary actions needed to rid Colombia of Escobar. In Narcos, Escobar is the near-invincible villain, unstoppable, undefeatable, and deeply feared. One scene in episode 10, season 1, showed Escobar escaping La Catedral. An army raid authorized by the Colombian government failed in its mission to capture Escobar or have him killed. A handful of soldiers who surrounded Escobar simply let him walk away. Why? Because they were too afraid to kill Escobar. But Escobar wasn't the only notorious criminal in Colombia. His death wasn't quite the end-all be-all solution to terrorism. Los Pepes was an organization considered even crueler than Pablo Escobar. It unleashed a wave of terrorism that was unparalleled in Colombian history. A classified intelligence briefing by the US State Department acknowledged that this group was more ferocious than Escobar. So why was Los Pepes depicted as an organization that did what it needed to do in its righteous mission to capture Escobar? Well, only the filmmakers know. Cali cartel wedding. The turning point in the Narcos series was in 1992 when the Medellin cartel bombed the wedding of Gilberto Rodriguez's daughter. This led to an irreconcilable conflict between the Medellin and the Cali cartels and resulted in animosity that cost Escobar his life. Turns out, this was pure fiction. Escobar never bombed the wedding. In fact, until the early 1980s, Cali cartel and the Medellin cartel had an alliance and cooperated to stabilize the drug market and divide up the territory in the US. Medellin controlled Miami and South Florida, while Cali had New York City and parts of the Southeast. Soon, business rivalry slowly festered between the two, and Cali cartel joined forces with the Colombian government and the Los Pepes to bring Escobar down to his last breath. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.